Rain hammered the cracked windshield of the truck as Finn Delaney shifted it into park outside the run-down fourplex, his 6-year-old daughter snoring softly in the backseat, her head resting on a stuffed pink giraffe. "Come on, Gia," he whispered, reaching back and gently lifting her into his arms. Her little arms looped around his neck automatically, thumb in mouth. Finn pushed open the creaky front door of apartment 3B with his shoulder, stepping into the dim hallway lit by a single flickering bulb. His boots squelched on the soaked mat. He was exhausted, 2 jobs, 90-hour weeks, late rent, and still not enough. And now, because the tenant in 4A had locked herself out, he was playing bellhop too. "Mr. Delaney." A soft voice called from behind. He turned, careful not to jostle Gia. A woman stood at the bottom of the stairs, soaked in the rain, clutching a large silver suitcase. Her hood had fallen back, revealing long, dark hair plastered to her cheeks and a face that looked too clean, too polished for this place. Her coat was designer, even if it was drenched. "I'm staying in 4A. The landlord said you live upstairs. He said you might have the spare key," she asked, her voice hopeful. "Yeah, I do," Finn said, adjusting Gia. "One sec." He unlocked his door, laid Gia down gently on the couch with a blanket, kissed her forehead, and jogged back out. He grabbed the spare key from the drawer and returned to the woman, who was still standing awkwardly with her suitcase beside her. "Here," he said, holding out the key. "You're Raegan, right?" "Yes, Raegan Vale," she said, brushing hair from her eyes. "Is it okay if I get the suitcase upstairs first? It's heavy." "I'll carry it," Finn offered instantly. "You look like you'll pull something." She blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "It's yeah." "No problem." He grabbed the suitcase, it was heavier than it looked, and started up the narrow stairs. She followed, watching him carefully. "You're strong," she said, a little breathless. "Single dad, comes with the territory." She smiled softly behind him. "Your daughter's adorable." Finn grunted in acknowledgement, setting the suitcase down outside the door of 4A. He unlocked it and pushed the door open. Raegan stepped inside slowly. "Thanks," she murmured, then turned to him. "Let me pay you for the trouble." He raised a brow. "Nah. It's just a suitcase." She hesitated. "Well, can I at least buy you coffee sometime?" Finn looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just pretty, she was stunning. She didn't belong in this building, not with the fraying carpets and leaky pipes, but her eyes were kind and her smile was real. "Sure," he said, nodding. "Coffee sounds good." Raegan watched him disappear down the stairs, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned to see him again, not like this. But when she'd found out he lived here after years of searching, years of regret, she couldn't stay away. Because once, a lifetime ago, Finn Delaney had been the boy who sat behind her in high school algebra, passing her folded notes and offering to walk her home when her dad forgot. And she'd been the girl who left without saying goodbye. Back in her apartment, Raegan dropped her coat, revealing a silk blouse and diamond necklace. She walked to the window, staring out into the rain. He didn't recognize her, and he had no idea she was a millionaire now, or that she was still in love with him. The next day, Finn carried Gia down the steps, her tiny hand slipping into his as they headed toward his truck. The morning was cold, and he was already late for his shift at the auto shop. "Morning," came a voice from the sidewalk. Raegan stood there holding 2 coffee cups, her hair dry and curled like she hadn't just moved into a crumbling building. "Hi," Finn said, surprised. "You didn't have to, I wanted to," she interrupted, offering him a cup. "Vanilla latte, right?" He blinked. "How'd you know?" "Lucky guess." Gia tugged on his arm. "Daddy, who's that?" "This is Miss Raegan. She just moved in upstairs." Raegan crouched down. "Hi, Gia, I love your giraffe." Gia lit up. "His name's Bobo." "Bobo's adorable." Finn watched their exchange, something warm curling in his chest. Raegan stood again, her eyes meeting his. "Do you have plans tonight?" she asked, a little nervous. "I was thinking, dinner, nothing fancy, just you, me, maybe Bobo." Finn hesitated. He hadn't dated in years. Who had time when rent was late and Gia needed lunch money, but something about Raegan made him say yes. That night, Raegan cooked. Nothing extravagant, just spaghetti and garlic bread in her tiny kitchen. Finn arrived with Gia, who immediately made herself at home on the couch with Bobo and a coloring book. "Hope you're hungry," Raegan said, handing Finn a glass of wine. He raised an eyebrow. "This is not $2 wine," she laughed. "You got me." "I splurged." They sat at the little table near the window, candles flickering between them. Raegan listened as Finn told stories about Gia, about working double shifts, about how he never thought life would turn out like this. "You're doing amazing," she said softly. "She's lucky to have you," he looked down. "Some days I don't know if I'm enough." "You are," she said, reaching across the table and touching his hand. Their eyes met. Something shifted, he cleared his throat. "What about you? What brought you here?" Raegan hesitated. "I needed a change. I used to live in the city. Work stuff. I wanted something quieter." He nodded, accepting it, though her answer was vague. "I'm glad you came," he said. She smiled. "Me too." Later, after Gia had fallen asleep on the couch and Finn was about to carry her home, Raegan touched his arm. "Wait," he paused. Raegan stepped closer, heart pounding. "Finn." He turned to her, eyes unsure, then she kissed him. It was soft, slow, but full of something that had been buried for years, something that never died. When she pulled back, Finn stared at her. "Raegan." "Good night," she whispered, stepping back and closing the door gently. Inside, her heart raced. He didn't know who she really was, not yet, but she was falling all over again. Raegan stood barefoot in her tiny kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of tea growing cold on the counter. The silence in the apartment was loud. There was no art on the walls, no plants on the sills. It was temporary. She hadn't meant to stay long. Yet here she was, reheating tea she wouldn't drink and replaying that kiss over and over again. How had one moment with Finn unraveled her so completely? She hadn't expected the weight of seeing him again to hit this hard. Not after all these years. Not after building a life so far removed from the girl she used to be. And yet, his eyes, still the same slate gray, had undone her in one glance. The next morning, she knocked gently on the door of 3B, holding a small paper bag. Finn opened it, half dressed in a black t-shirt, a wrench in his back pocket, a smear of grease on his forearm. Somewhere inside, she could hear Gia humming along to a cartoon-themed song. "Hey," he said, blinking at her like he hadn't expected to see her again so soon. "I brought muffins," she said, lifting the bag. "Blueberry, no walnuts." He stepped aside to let her in without a word. Gia looked up and grinned. "Miss Raegan." "Hi, sweetheart." Raegan crossed the room and sat beside her on the floor. "What are you coloring today?" "Unicorns," Gia said proudly, holding up a picture with streaks of purple and gold. Finn leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I wanted to," she said, keeping her eyes on the coloring book. He watched her for a long moment, then rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, about last night, I know," she interrupted, standing. "It was fast. It surprised me too. I didn't say I regretted it." She met his gaze. "Then what are you saying?" Finn exhaled, glancing toward Gia, who was now fully engrossed with her crayons. He crossed the room and lowered his voice. "I'm saying I don't know where this is going. I haven't done this in a long time, and Gia's my whole life. I can't afford to bring someone into it unless I know it's real." Raegan's throat tightened. "I understand," she said, quieter now, "but I'm not here to play at anything, Finn." He studied her, something shifting in his expression. "You're not like the people around here." "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said. "It's just, I've seen women like you. They come in, get bored of the cracks in the plaster, and leave." "I'm not bored," she said flatly. "And I'm not leaving." She handed him the bag of muffins, then bent down and kissed Gia's head. "I'll see you both later." She walked out without waiting for a reply. That afternoon, Finn stood beneath the hood of a Lexus, cursing under his breath as steam poured from the radiator. He wiped sweat from his brow and reached blindly for the socket wrench, but it wasn't there. "Looking for this?" came a voice behind him. He turned to see Raegan standing in the garage doorway, holding the tool out to him. He blinked. "How did you?" "I asked the guy at the counter," she said. "You left your phone in your truck. I figured you might need it." He took the wrench, eyeing her. "You walked here. It's only 10 blocks. You wore heels." Raegan shrugged. "I've walked farther and worse." He looked at her, really looked this time. There was dirt on her shoes, a smudge on the hem of her white blouse. Her cheeks were flushed, not from makeup but from the walk. Something inside him shifted. "You didn't have to do that." "Stop saying that every time I show up," she said, crossing her arms. "I'm not here out of pity. You think I'm doing this because I feel sorry for you. I don't know why you're doing this," he admitted. She stepped closer, her voice steady. "Because I want to. Because I've wasted years trying to forget someone who never really left my heart." Finn's grip tightened on the wrench. "You don't even know me anymore." "Maybe not," she said. "But I know what kind of man you are, and I'm not scared of the cracks in your walls." He stared at her, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something deeper he hadn't felt in years. Before he could respond, a horn blared outside. Finn glanced out the garage window. "Gia's school bus," he muttered. Raegan stepped back. "Go, I'll lock up your truck." He hesitated, then tossed her the keys. By the time he returned with Gia, the Lexus was fixed, the tools were put away, and Raegan was gone, but there was a note on the dash. "Dinner, again, my place. 7. He stared at it for a long moment before folding it into his pocket. That night, he knocked on her door at exactly 7. She opened it wearing jeans and a navy sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. "You're early," she said. "You left a note," he replied. "I figured that was your way of saying don't make me wait," she grinned. "Come in." This time the table was set for 3. Raegan had even borrowed a booster seat from the neighbor next door. Gia clambered up onto it, her eyes wide at the spread of food. "Lasagna," she squealed. "I heard it's your favorite," Raegan said, setting down a bowl of salad. "You remembered," Finn said, surprised. "I asked her," she replied simply. Dinner passed with laughter, stories, and a second helping of garlic knots. Finn found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years. After they finished, Gia curled up on the couch and dozed off. "I should get her to bed," Finn said, rising. Raegan followed him to the door. "Finn," she said softly, stopping him. "There's something I need to tell you." He turned. "I wasn't entirely honest when I said I just needed a change," she said, folding her hands. "I came here because I knew you lived here. I found out a few months ago, and I couldn't stop thinking about you." He didn't speak. "I didn't know how to tell you," she continued. "I was scared you wouldn't want anything to do with me if you knew I'd kept that from you." Finn's eyes darkened. "You came here because of me." "Yes. And you didn't think I had the right to know that." "I didn't want to scare you off," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't know if you'd even want me around." He stared at her, jaw tight. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to think." He turned and walked down the stairs, Gia asleep in his arms. Raegan stood in the doorway long after he disappeared. She'd told him the truth. But she hadn't told him everything, not yet. The apartment was quiet once Gia had gone to sleep, but Finn couldn't settle. He stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the small window above it, watching the wind stir the branches of the tree outside. Her words played back in his mind, each one louder than the last. "I came here because I knew you lived here." She hadn't looked away when she said it. That was what bothered him most. Raegan hadn't flinched, she hadn't stammered. She'd stood there, calm and sure, like she'd been carrying it for too long and finally dropped it at his feet, not caring how it landed. He opened the small cupboard and pulled out the last clean mug, poured some water and drank it without tasting. He didn't know what she wanted from him. She'd kissed him, fed his daughter, showed up at the garage like she belonged in his life. But now it was clear Raegan had come here with a history she hadn't shared. That wasn't something he could ignore. And yet there was no denying what was happening. 2 days passed, she didn't show up. No coffee, no notes, no dinner invitations. By the 3rd morning, he found himself walking past her door slower than usual, lingering for a beat before heading downstairs with Gia. "Why don't we see Miss Raegan anymore?" Gia asked as they buckled into the truck. "She's probably busy," Finn said, adjusting the seatbelt across her chest. "Can we bring her something?" He hesitated, then shut the door. "Let's get breakfast first," but he couldn't shake it. That evening, after Gia fell asleep watching a nature documentary, Finn stood in front of Raegan's door with a bottle of ginger ale and a small container of soup he'd picked up from the corner deli. He knocked twice. The door opened slowly. Raegan stood there in a soft gray t-shirt and loose pants, her face bare, her expression unreadable. "I brought you something," he said, holding up the food. "You looked tired last time we spoke." She stepped aside without answering. The apartment looked the same, but something about her felt different. She sat on the edge of the couch, wrapping her arms around her knees. "I didn't know if I should reach out again," she said quietly. "I didn't want to push you." "You didn't," he said, "but I needed space." "That wasn't a small thing you told me." "I know." Finn placed the soup on the table and sat across from her. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come back after all this time?" Raegan rested her chin on her knee. "Because I made a mistake when I left." And by the time I realized it, too much time had passed. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me. That doesn't explain the secrecy. I didn't want you to think I pitied you or that I was here to fix something broken. I just wanted a chance to know you again. The version of you I remembered was honest, loyal, kind. I wanted to believe that person still existed. He does, Finn said, but he's tired, and he doesn't have time for games. I'm not playing, she said. You think I don't know what it looks like? A woman with money showing up in a building like this, knocking on your door. I wasn't trying to manipulate you. You still haven't told me what you do, he said. I run a foundation, she said. Educational programs, scholarships. I inherited most of it after my parents passed. The rest came from work, investments. I've done well, but I've never felt like any of it mattered until I started seeing you again. He leaned forward. You think money matters to me? No, she said, but the truth does. There was a long pause. Finn ran a hand down his face. I've been trying to hold everything together for so long. I don't know how to let someone else help. I don't trust easy, not with Gia, not with myself. I'm not asking you to trust me overnight, she said, but I'm here. I'm not walking out this time. He looked at her, truly looked. No makeup, no polished words, just a woman who was scared and brave at the same time. I don't want Gia to get attached to someone who won't stay, he said. Then let me prove I will. He stood, walked to the door, and paused. I'm not saying yes. But I'm not saying no either. She nodded, her eyes following him. Good night, Finn. He turned his head slightly. Lock the door behind me. The next day, as he worked under the hood of a broken-down sedan, a sleek black car pulled into the lot. Finn wiped his hands on a rag as the driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Raegan emerged, dressed in a sharp navy blazer, heels clicking against the pavement. He blinked. She walked straight up to him, the wind catching her hair. I have a board meeting downtown, she said. But I wanted to see you first. He crossed his arms. You know showing up like this won't go unnoticed around here. Let them notice, she said. I'm not hiding anymore. She handed him a small envelope. What's this? An invitation. There's a charity fundraiser next weekend. I'd like you to come, both of you. You think I have a suit? I think you underestimate me. She turned and walked back to the car. Inside the envelope was a gold-embossed invitation and a handwritten note. I want you to see my world. Not because I think it's better, but because I want you in it. Finn stared at the words as the car disappeared down the street. Gia called from the sidewalk. Daddy, what's that? He folded the note and tucked it into his chest pocket. Something we need a babysitter for, he said. And just like that, the walls he'd built started to shift. The fundraiser was being held at the Glassmore Estate, an opulent, historic mansion just outside the city, where politicians, philanthropists, and media moguls gathered under chandeliers taller than Gia's school bus. Finn had never been to a place like it. He stood beside Raegan, his hand resting on the small of her back, while his eyes swept the room filled with people who looked like they belonged in magazines. Gia was home with Mrs. Langley from 2A, who'd agreed to watch her for the night with promises of popcorn and a Disney movie marathon. You look like you're about to dodge a punch, Raegan said, leaning toward him. Finn adjusted the collar of the crisp black suit she'd had delivered earlier that week. You sure they're not going to throw me out for not knowing which fork to use? No one here cares about forks, she said. They care about who's writing the biggest check. Then I definitely don't belong. You belong with me, she said, her voice clear and quiet. That's all that matters. Finn exhaled, letting some of the tension in his shoulders fall away as she guided him toward a group near the bar. Everyone turned when they approached. A man in a tailored gray tuxedo stepped forward, offering a polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. Raegan, he said, kissing her cheek. Didn't expect to see you tonight. I'm on the board, she replied coolly, not sure why that's surprising. The man's gaze flicked to Finn, assessing. And this is Finn Delaney, she said without hesitation. My partner. Finn didn't flinch at the word, but he felt the room tilt slightly. A few people murmured hellos, but the air was thick with scrutiny. Raegan didn't blink. The man extended a hand. Gavin Vale, Regan's cousin. Finn shook it. She mentioned family. Didn't realize you were part of the event. She didn't mention me at all, Gavin asked, glancing at Raegan. That's disappointing. Hard to fit everything into a few weeks, she said, her expression unreadable. Gavin turned back to Finn. So what do you do? I fix engines, Finn said. Raegan reached for a glass of champagne off a passing tray and handed it to Finn. He owns a garage, she said, and raises a daughter on his own. He gets more done in a day than most of us do in a month. There was a beat of silence. I respect that, Gavin said finally, before turning to speak to someone else. Finn leaned toward her. You didn't have to say that. I wanted to, she replied, sipping her own drink. Later, as the speeches began and the string quartet played softly, Finn wandered out onto the balcony. The night was cool, the city lights glittering in the distance. He leaned on the stone railing, trying to make sense of the past few weeks. Everything had flipped since the day he'd carried that suitcase upstairs. It didn't feel real, and yet Raegan felt real. The way she looked at him, the way she fought to keep him close, it was all too solid to ignore. You always disappear when events get too polished, Raegan said behind him. He turned. I needed air. She stepped beside him, her heels echoing on the stone. I didn't want to throw you into this world without warning, but I needed you to see it. He looked at her, her face lit by the city beyond the trees. Why? So I'd know how far apart we live, so you'd know I don't care how far apart it looks. He was silent a moment. I keep thinking about the day you showed up, the suitcase. You could have just walked past me. Let someone else help. Why didn't you? I couldn't, she said. I spent too long wondering if I'd ever see you again. When I did, when I saw you holding your daughter like the world depended on it, I knew I had to try. Finn looked down at the ring on her right hand, a thin band with a small sapphire. You've got people here, family, money. Why risk it for someone like me? Because none of this means anything if I don't have you. He didn't speak. She stepped closer, brushing her fingers against his wrist. I know you're scared. I know you've been carrying the weight of everything for so long it feels like letting go would break you. But I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to carry it with you. His voice was rough. I don't know how to let someone do that. You already have, she whispered. A waiter brushed past them, heading toward the ballroom. Someone inside announced the next speaker. Finn didn't move. I can't promise I'll be perfect, he said. I'm still figuring out how to give Gia the life she deserves. I mess up. I get things wrong. I don't need perfect, she said. I need honest, and I need you. He turned to face her fully. If this is real, if you mean it, then I'm all in, but I need you to promise me something, anything. Don't leave again, not without saying goodbye. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. Never again. By the time they returned to the ballroom, the speeches were over, and the music had shifted into something slower. Raegan led him to the floor, wrapping her arms around his neck as they danced in the soft glow of the chandeliers. He held her close, not caring who watched. A week later, Finn stood in the middle of their building's front yard, staring up at the crooked gutters and peeling paint. A sleek black SUV pulled up beside the curb. Raegan stepped out, holding 2 iced coffees and a small cardboard box. What's that? Finn asked, reaching for the drinks. Keys, she said. To a new place, still closed to Gia's school, bigger kitchen, no mold in the bathroom. He raised an eyebrow. You bought a place? No, she said. I bought us a place. He looked at her open expression, the hope tucked behind her words. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Finn looked toward the building, then back to her. We'll need to pack. I already started, she said. I may have borrowed some boxes from the garage. Gia ran outside a few minutes later, clutching Bobo and a coloring book. We're moving, she asked, eyes wide. Raegan knelt in front of her. Only if you want to. We'll have space for your own room and maybe even a dog, Gia gasped. A dog, Finn laughed. Don't make promises we can't keep, Raegan grinned. I don't. Not anymore. 3 weeks later, they stood on the back porch of the new house, watching Gia chase Bubbles across the yard. A quiet settled over them, the kind that only comes after chaos has been replaced by certainty. Finn slipped his hand into Raegan's, their fingers locking as naturally as breath. I never saw this coming, he said. I did, she replied. The second you carried my suitcase upstairs. He looked at her, then kissed her like it was the first time all over again. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly right. Raegan stood at the edge of the garden, tugging off her gloves and brushing a streak of dirt from her cheek with the back of her hand. The roses had finally taken root in the soil behind the porch, their pale pink blooms just beginning to open beneath the early spring sun. From the open window, she could hear Gia's laughter as she bounced on the couch, counting the bubbles that drifted in from the backyard. Finn stepped out holding a mug of coffee, his tie still loose around his neck. "You're going to spoil her with that bubble machine. She deserves it," Raegan said, accepting the mug. "Besides, it was your idea to let her pick it out. She was supposed to choose a puzzle." "You saw what happened the second she found the one with the lights." Raegan laughed, leaning against the railing beside him. "She's got your negotiation skills." "No," he said, sipping from his own mug. "She's got your stubborn streak." She tilted her head. "You think I'm stubborn? I think you're relentless," he said, in the best way. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the breeze pick up through the trees. Raegan's voice was softer when she spoke again. "I heard from the scholarship board this morning." Finn looked over. "Yeah, they've approved the new partnership proposal, the one we drafted together." "That's the one with the mentorship program," she nodded. "Gia's school is already on the list. We'll be able to offer academic support and extracurriculars for kids who have never had access to either." He reached for her free hand. "You really made it happen." "We made it happen." He squeezed her fingers. "You've changed everything, you know that?" Raegan turned to him. "So have you." They went inside together, finding Gia on the living room rug surrounded by a sea of crayons and construction paper. She held up a drawing triumphantly. "It's us," she said. "See, that's me and that's Daddy and that's Ray. You have a crown." Raegan laughed. "Why do I get a crown?" "Because you're the queen," Gia said matter-of-factly, then went back to coloring. Finn crouched beside her, brushing a curl out of her eyes. "Can we frame this one?" Gia nodded. "Only if it goes in the hallway." "Deal." That night, after Gia had fallen asleep in her new canopy bed with Bobo tucked under one arm, Raegan stepped into the kitchen to find Finn opening a small velvet box on the counter. Her breath caught. He didn't say anything at first, just turned to face her, holding the box open between them. Inside was a ring. A single diamond set in a thin platinum band, simple, elegant, and unmistakably hers. "I didn't want to wait any longer," he said. "I've spent years thinking I couldn't give anyone more than a roof and a few meals. But now I know better. I can give you this life, my life, all of it." Raegan's voice was barely a whisper. "You're sure?" He stepped closer. "I've never been more sure of anything. I want you beside me every morning, every night. I want you with Gia and me for every mess, every dance party, every meltdown, every birthday. I want to build something that lasts." She reached for him, her throat tightening. "Yes." "Of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her slow, deep, and full of everything they hadn't been able to say when their lives were built on different foundations. They didn't need chandeliers or champagne, just each other. A few weeks later, they married in the garden behind their house. The roses were in full bloom, and Gia served as flower girl, tossing petals in uneven handfuls while insisting Bobo walk beside her wearing a bow tie. Raegan wore a dress that shimmered in the sunlight, delicate and soft, with a bouquet of white peonies and blush ranunculus in her hands. Finn stood waiting beneath the arbor, wearing a navy suit and an expression that said he still couldn't believe she was real. When they exchanged vows, there were no empty promises, just truth. "I fell in love with you before I even understood what love meant," she said. "And now, I know it's this building something out of nothing and choosing each other every day." Finn's voice was thick. "You saw me when most people didn't even look. You came back when you didn't have to. You gave me a reason to believe in more." They kissed to scattered applause from neighbors, friends, and a few of Raegan's colleagues who had learned to stop underestimating the man she'd chosen. After the ceremony, they danced beneath string lights in the yard, Gia perched on Finn's shoes as he twirled her clumsily in circles. The cake wasn't fancy and the playlist kept skipping, but it didn't matter. The people who mattered were all there. As the sun dipped below the trees, Raegan leaned into Finn's chest, her hand resting over his heart. "Think we'll ever get bored of this?" she asked. "Of you," he said. "Not in 1,000 lifetimes." They stood like that, wrapped in a quiet that only came when everything had finally fallen into place. The next morning, the house smelled like syrup and coffee. Gia padded into the kitchen half asleep, dragging Bobo by one leg. "Are we still a family today?" she asked. Finn knelt down and scooped her into his arms. "Every single day." Raegan pressed a kiss to Gia's cheek, then met Finn's gaze over her shoulder. They didn't need to say anything else. They had their forever. And it was more than either of them had ever dreamed.